Before we begin, if you love epic HFY sci-fi, tales where humanity defies impossible odds against alien empires, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. Now let's dive into tonight's tale. The vaulted lecture hall hummed with quiet anticipation as dozens of alien students settled into their tiered seats. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the environmental systems, and the walls shimmered with holographic displays that awaited activation. At the center of it all stood Professor Ktharn, his long silver robes brushing the floor as he adjusted the settings on his lectern. His angular frame and ridged brow gave him an austere appearance, though it was his reputation as the foremost xenogeologist in the sector that commanded respect. His voice carried easily across the chamber, deep and deliberate, like stone grinding against stone. "Today," he began, tapping a rune on the console, "we shall study the most dreaded phenomenon any planetary survey can reveal: mountains that bleed fire." The lights dimmed, and the first image flared across the vast holoscreen. A towering cone of black rock, glowing fissures spilling molten rivers that cascaded into a sea of red. Explosions of flame shot skyward, illuminating a sky choked with ash. Around the room, gasps rippled through the diverse assembly of students. Daniel Hayes leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. To him, the image was oddly comforting, almost familiar, though he was the only human in the class. His fellow students recoiled with dread, whispering in their various tongues, clicking mandibles and flicking scaled tails in alarm. Professor Ktharn's voice grew heavier, grave. "Such worlds are deemed cursed. Their surfaces erupt without warning, venting the fury of their planetary hearts. Entire colonies have perished when surveyors failed to detect these fiery beasts. To settle upon such a place is to invite oblivion." Near Daniel, Urthak, an insectoid with glistening black carapace and multifaceted eyes, shivered audibly, his mandibles clacking nervously. "Unthinkable," he muttered. "Entire landscapes devouring themselves in flame." Jorvak, a broad-shouldered reptilian student with emerald scales and a forked tongue, hissed in agreement. "Such worlds should be abandoned to the void. No species with sense would linger in such a place." Daniel chuckled under his breath, earning a sidelong glare from Jorvak. He didn't bother to hide his amusement. To him, the scene on the holoscreen wasn't some vision of hell, it was a schoolbook illustration, the sort he'd seen 100 times as a child. Professor Ktharn continued his lecture, gesturing to diagrams that showed lava flows consuming forests, pyroclastic surges sweeping across valleys, entire regions transformed into wastelands in minutes. His voice rang with solemnity. "This is annihilation made manifest, a reminder of how fragile life truly is. It is why the presence of such mountains marks a planet as unsuitable for habitation." At that, Daniel let out a small laugh. It slipped from him involuntarily, the kind of laugh that comes when something is both ridiculous and absurdly obvious. The sound, sharp and human, cut through the hushed hall. Dozens of alien heads turned in unison. Eyes of all shapes, slitted, compound, multifaceted, luminous, fixed on him. The silence grew so thick it was almost physical. Daniel raised his brows, unfazed. "Sorry," he said casually, though there was no real apology in his tone. "It's just, you make it sound like the end of the universe. Back home we call those volcanoes." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Whispers rose, urgent and panicked. Rithakis' mandibles clicked frantically. "Volcanoes? You mean to say your world suffers from these abominations?" "Not suffers," Daniel corrected, leaning forward with a smirk. "Lives with them." Jorvak hissed sharply, his tail lashing the floor. "Impossible. No intelligent species could thrive in such madness. You lie to make yourself seem formidable." Daniel laughed again, louder this time, shaking his head. "Oh, believe me, I'm not exaggerating. Earth's got thousands of them. Some are still active, erupting every so often. People actually live nearby. Hell, some even climb them for fun." A collective shudder ran through the class. Professor Ktharn's expression tightened, his heavy brow knitting together. His long fingers tapped against the lectern as though calculating whether the human's words were delusion or revelation. "Climb?" Rithakis' voice cracked with disbelief. "You willingly ascend these death mountains?" "Sure," Daniel said easily. "Some are tourist spots. Families take pictures. People hike the trails, admire the view. They're dangerous, sure, but also beautiful. And the soil around them? Perfect for farming. Some of the most fertile land in the world is volcanic." Gasps and low growls filled the hall. Students recoiled, some clutching their robes, others clicking in alarm. To them, the human's words were as if he had claimed to drink acid for sport. Jorvok slammed his clawed hand against the arm of his chair. Madness. This is proof of your species' recklessness. You treat catastrophe as amusement. Daniel tilted his head, considering, then gave a lopsided grin. Or maybe it's proof that we know how to live with danger instead of running from it. Depends on how you look at it. Professor Ktharn raised a hand, silencing the uproar. His deep voice rumbled with authority. Enough. Human Haze, your words defy reason, but the gravity of your claim cannot be dismissed. If what you say is true, then your species inhabits what others would classify as a death world. His piercing eyes lingered on Daniel, unreadable. Tell me, why do you laugh? Daniel shrugged, the grin never fading. Because to us it's normal. Fire mountains aren't curses. They're part of the scenery. You grow up seeing them, you learn not to panic. And when you realize you can survive something that terrifying, sometimes the only thing left to do is laugh. The professor's gaze lingered on him, as though weighing not just his words but the audacity behind them. Around the hall, the silence was taut, every student staring at the lone human who dared to make light of apocalypse. The holoscreen still displayed rivers of molten rock, glowing against the darkness like open wounds in the earth. Yet now, in the minds of those present, the image carried something new, an unsettling realization that what they feared as ultimate destruction, one species treated as ordinary life. Professor Ktharn slowly deactivated the display. The last ember of light faded, leaving the hall in shadow. His voice, when it came, was low but resonant. Class is adjourned. Tomorrow Human Haze will explain this phenomenon to us in detail. If his account proves accurate, we may be forced to reconsider our understanding of planetary survival. Chairs scraped, wings rustled, claws clicked, tails flicked. The students filed out in uneasy silence, some muttering in disbelief, others glancing back at Daniel as though he were a creature far stranger than any they had studied. Daniel remained seated a moment longer, watching them go with a faint smile tugging at his lips. He had not meant to become the center of attention, yet now he was. The universe, it seemed, had never imagined that a species could laugh at fire bleeding from mountains. He stood, stretching, and murmured under his breath with wry amusement, "Guess class just got a lot more interesting." The following day the lecture hall was already buzzing by the time Daniel arrived. Conversations rose and fell in a dozen alien dialects, but every eye flicked toward him when he crossed the threshold. The human presence no longer went unnoticed. Whispers followed him like a shadow. He smirked faintly and slid into his seat, stretching his legs with casual ease, though the tension in the air was palpable. Rithak sat rigidly beside him, mandibles clicking nervously, as if proximity to Daniel meant sharing in his madness. You truly intend to speak today?" the insectoid asked, voice low and tremulous. Daniel leaned back, resting his hands behind his head. "Looks like it. Professor's orders." Across the row Jorvok's scaled form bristled. His golden eyes narrowed, his forked tongue flicking with disdain. "I look forward to exposing your lies," he hissed. "No species could treat such destruction with levity. If your kind does, it is proof of insanity, not strength." Daniel grinned at him. "Then you'd better pay attention. You might actually learn something." Before Jorvok could retort, the heavy doors shut and the room fell silent. Professor Ktharn stepped forward, his long robes sweeping the floor. His eyes glowed faintly under the projection light as he gestured to the holoscreen. "Yesterday Human Haze made a claim that challenges our collective understanding. He asserted that his species lives upon a world riddled with volcanoes, mountains that bleed fire, and treats them as natural rather than apocalyptic. Today he will explain this." He inclined his head toward Daniel. "The floor is yours, Human Haze. Enlighten us if you can." Daniel rose, feeling the weight of countless alien eyes. He walked to the center with a steady gait, outwardly calm though his pulse quickened with anticipation. This wasn't just a class anymore, it was a trial of sorts. He tapped the console, summoning images from the database he had uploaded the night before. The holoscreen flared to life with a vivid photograph. A cone-shaped mountain, its peak glowing orange as streams of molten lava crawled down its sides beneath a star-streaked night sky. "This," Daniel began, "is Mount Kilauea. Back home, it's practically a tourist attraction." A chorus of horrified sounds erupted from the class. Some students leaned back in their seats, others covered their faces, unable to comprehend the casual tone with which the human spoke. Daniel continued as if lecturing schoolchildren. "Volcanoes are formed by the movement of tectonic plates, massive slabs of the Earth's crust shifting over molten rock. Pressure builds, magma finds a weak spot and boom. You get this beautiful mess. He flicked through images, glowing rivers of lava at night, plumes of smoke curling against blue skies, villages nestled at the foot of volcanic slopes. Rithak's voice cracked. You live there? By choice. Of course, Daniel said. People farm in the volcanic soil. It's some of the richest in the world. Crops thrive. Whole civilizations rose because of it. He tapped the console again, showing ruins preserved in ash. Ever heard of Pompeii? A Roman city frozen in time after Mount Vesuvius erupted. Tragic, yeah, but also a treasure trove for historians. We learned about our past thanks to that eruption. Professor Ktharnus' brows furrowed, his long fingers clasped before him. You speak of catastrophe as if it were useful. Daniel smiled faintly. That's because it is. Danger doesn't mean hopelessness. It means opportunity if you know how to deal with it. Jorvak hissed from his seat, his voice sharp. Opportunity? You stand upon the brink of annihilation and call it opportunity? His scaled fists clenched. Your kind is reckless. You court extinction for the sake of arrogance. Daniel's grin widened. Or maybe we just don't scare as easily as you do. He advanced the holoscreen again, showing people in bright jackets hiking up a volcanic trail, smiling for photos. We don't just live near volcanoes. We climb them. We marvel at them. Some of us even study them up close to better understand the planet. It's dangerous, sure, but we prepare. We adapt. We take the risk because the reward, knowledge, beauty, even joy, is worth it. The silence that followed was heavy. The aliens were transfixed by the images. Tiny humans silhouetted against glowing lava, children pointing at fountains of fire with wide-eyed wonder, scientists standing in protective suits near rivers of molten rock. Rithak finally spoke, his voice hushed, awed. You laugh at them. You smile in the face of fire. Daniel shrugged. Why not? Fear doesn't stop the mountain from erupting. But laughter? It reminds us we're alive. It keeps us sane when the world shakes under our feet. Professor Ktharn leaned forward slightly, studying him as though he were some rare specimen. His voice was measured, deliberate. You claim your species has found a way to coexist with planetary death. To embrace it even? This is no trivial matter. It defies every principle we have taught for generations. Daniel met his gaze evenly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe you've been looking at it the wrong way. What you call death, we call part of life. The professor was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, as though reordering the very foundation of his knowledge. Around the hall, students muttered, unsettled. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared at Daniel with a strange mixture of fear and fascination. Jorvak finally broke the silence, his voice like a growl. You glorify peril. That is not wisdom, it is madness. Daniel looked at him, unbothered, and said simply, maybe it's both. The words hung in the air, daring anyone to challenge them. Jorvak's nostrils flared, but he said nothing more. Rithak, by contrast, leaned closer, his compound eyes glimmering with something that looked almost like curiosity. Tell me, he asked hesitantly, what else does your world endure? Daniel smiled at that. Plenty. But one lesson at a time, my friend. Professor Ktharn finally straightened, his voice ringing through the hall. This cannot be dismissed as mere cultural peculiarity. Human Hayes, your testimony demands examination. Tomorrow you will deliver a formal presentation to the entire class. If your account is true, it may alter how we classify not only your species but the very criteria by which we judge habitability. The declaration sent ripples of shock through the assembly. Some students muttered in protest, others in uneasy anticipation. Jorvak's eyes burned with resentment, but even he stayed silent, recognizing the professor's word as final. Daniel gave a small bow, lips quirking in amusement. Gladly, Professor. I'll bring pictures. As the session ended, the students filed out in silence, broken only by occasional muttered disbelief. Yet the silence felt different now, heavier with possibility. Where once they had dismissed the human as a fool, now they regarded him as a riddle, a creature who laughed where others wept, who saw beauty where others saw doom. Daniel lingered a moment, watching the holoscreen dim into blackness. The edges of his smile sharpened as he thought about what tomorrow would bring. For the first time since joining the academy, he felt the entire galaxy leaning closer, listening. And he intended to make sure they never forgot what they heard. The academy buzzed like a hive in turmoil. In the corridors, students whispered Daniel Hayes' name as if invoking something dangerous, something unpredictable. Some looked at him with awe, others with suspicion, but none with indifference. The human had become the subject of endless debates, his laughter dissected like a specimen under glass. Daniel tried to ignore the stares as he walked toward his next lecture, but the air itself seemed charged, as though every word carried the weight of judgment. Rthak scuttled alongside him, antennae quivering with energy. "They speak of you in every hall," the insectoid said, his mandibles clicking. "Some call it bravery. Some call it madness. But all agree it was unforgettable. Tell me, did you truly laugh at the bleeding of mountains?" Daniel gave a half-smile. "Yeah. It wasn't a performance. It just came out." Rthak tilted his head, compound eyes glittering. "To me it felt like a song. A defiance against inevitability. Perhaps your kind sings to death instead of bowing to it." Daniel chuckled. "That's one way to put it." As they entered the lecture hall, the atmosphere thickened. More students than usual filled the room, many from other disciplines. The news had spread too widely to contain. At the front, Professor Ktharn stood like a monolith, his gaze scanning the restless crowd. "Today," the professor rumbled, "we will continue our study of catastrophic forces. Yet before we begin, it seems the class desires to revisit yesterday's disruption." Dozens of eyes fixed on Daniel. He straightened in his seat, heart thudding but face steady. Ktharn's eyes narrowed. Human haze approach. Daniel walked to the front. He could feel the judgment in the air, the anticipation of hundreds waiting to see whether he would falter. Ktharn gestured toward the holoscreen, which displayed the volcano once more, its molten rivers carving fiery paths into darkness. "Explain," the professor said, his tone both commanding and probing. Daniel took a breath. "You all see destruction. I see something else. On Earth, people live near these things. Some of the richest soil grows at their base. Crops feed families because of the ash. Towns flourish in the shadow of mountains that can kill them at any moment." A low ripple of disbelief spread through the hall. "You choose this?" someone hissed from the crowd. "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "Because fear isn't the only answer. You prepare, you adapt, and you live. If you spend your life hiding, you stop living at all." Jorvak rose suddenly from his seat, scales glinting under the lights. His voice was sharp, almost a hiss. "You glorify recklessness. To laugh at such danger is not courage, it is stupidity. A species that toys with fire will one day be consumed by it." Daniel met his eyes without blinking. "Maybe. But until that day we'll have built cities, written stories, raised children, and touched the stars. Can your people say the same if you run from every spark?" The hall went utterly silent. Even Ktharn's stern mask flickered as if something beneath it stirred. Rthak raised one trembling limb. "Professor, may I ask, if humans endure fire itself, what does that mean for us? For our understanding of survival?" Ktharn did not answer immediately. His gaze remained on Daniel, heavy and searching. "It means," he said slowly, "that survival is not only the absence of fear. It may also be the mastery of it." Jorvak's jaw tightened, but he sat, though his eyes burned with unspoken challenge. Ktharn turned back to Daniel. "Your words disturb the order of this academy. But perhaps disturbance is necessary. If humanity's way is laughter in the face of doom, then it must be studied, for it may reshape what we believe possible." A tremor of awe ran through the class. Daniel exhaled slowly, knowing this was no longer about him alone. His entire species had just been dragged into the light. The lecture resumed, though few listened. Eyes kept drifting back to Daniel as though waiting for him to erupt again. By the end, whispers followed him into the hall like shadows. Rthak scurried close, voice hushed with excitement. "Do you understand what you have done?" The professor spoke of mastery, not just survival. "That is revolutionary." Daniel shook his head. "I didn't plan any of this. I just told the truth." "Sometimes," Rthak replied, "truth is more dangerous than fire." Later that night, Daniel wandered the courtyard, the sky above washed in silver light from the planet's twin moons. The voices of the day echoed in his head, awe, anger, disbelief. He had come to learn, not to teach, yet now the academy seemed to revolve around him. A shadow moved across the path. Jorvak emerged, posture rigid, golden eyes fixed on him. "You think us cowards," Jorvak said, his tone sharp but controlled. "You mock our caution. But your arrogance blinds you. Fire consumes all in the end." Daniel met his gaze calmly. "I don't think you're cowards. I think you've never been pushed hard enough to see what else you can be." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. Then Jorvak's lips curled, not quite a smile but something close to it. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you simply do not yet understand the price of defiance." He turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing under the twin moons, thoughtful. Rithakis' words echoed in his mind. Truth is more dangerous than fire. And Daniel knew the storm was only beginning. Separate so you can upload episodically? The academy was never quiet after that lecture. The echo of human laughter lingered in every corridor, carried by whispers, repeated in debates that stretched long into the night. Some called Daniel Hayes a fool who mocked annihilation, others a herald of something new, a representative of a species that refused to bow to fear. Either way, he had become impossible to ignore. When Daniel entered the lecture hall for the next session, the crowd was larger than ever. Students from unrelated fields filled every seat, perched on stairwells, even standing in the aisles. All of them had come for one reason, to hear more of the human who laughed at fire. Professor Ktharn stood at the dais, his expression as stern as ever, though there was a subtle weight in his eyes that had not been there before. He raised his hand and the murmurs fell silent. Today is not a lecture. Today it is a reckoning. What we have witnessed challenges the foundation of our understanding. It forces us to question whether fear defines us, or whether we define fear. And so, we shall hear once more from Human Hayes. Daniel walked forward, feeling the tension ripple through the crowd. He could see Rithak seated near the front, antennae trembling with anticipation, mandibles parted slightly as if to drink in every word. Jorvak sat rigid on the other side, his arms crossed, golden eyes burning with defiance, though even he did not speak. Daniel activated the console, but instead of images he began with words. His voice carried clear and unflinching. You all think fear keeps you alive. But fear alone has never built anything. Fear doesn't plant crops in volcanic soil. Fear doesn't climb mountains or sail oceans or touch the stars. Fear hides. Courage builds. And sometimes courage looks like madness, like laughing at a mountain that bleeds fire. The silence was so thick that even the ventilation hum seemed distant. Daniel let the pause stretch, then tapped the console. The holoscreen flared, showing a compilation he had prepared. Humans standing at the edge of erupting volcanoes, scientists calmly recording data as ash rained around them, children holding their parents' hands while fountains of lava lit the night sky. Interspersed were images of green valleys and thriving towns in the shadows of those same peaks, proof that life not only endured but flourished. This is who we are, Daniel said, gesturing toward the display. We don't run from danger. We measure it. We learn it. We live with it until it becomes part of our story. And when it tries to break us, we laugh, not because we're unafraid but because fear doesn't get the last word. A murmur rose, this time not of horror but of awe. Some students leaned forward, drawn in, while others sat rigid, unwilling to accept what they were hearing. Jorvak finally stood, scales rippling, his voice sharp as steel. And what of those who perish? You make light of the dead. You claim laughter in the face of ruin. Is that not dishonor? Is that not cruelty? Daniel met his gaze squarely. No. It's respect. We remember them. We honor them by refusing to let fear swallow us whole. The dead teach us but they don't chain us. We carry them with us and we keep living. That's how we win. The hall stirred again. Jorvak's jaw tightened, but something in his eyes shifted. Not acceptance, not agreement, but the faintest flicker of grudging respect. He sat without another word. Professor Ktharn stepped forward, his heavy robes whispering against the floor. His deep voice filled the hall. Students, do you understand what this means? A species that can look upon apocalypse and call it ordinary. A species that we have underestimated because we believed survival was only the absence of fear. Today we learned that survival can also be the mastery of it. He turned his gaze toward Daniel. Human Hayes, your laughter has become more than noise. It is a mirror, forcing us to see ourselves in its reflection. Perhaps that is why it unsettles us so. Rithak raised one trembling limb, his voice fragile but sincere. Professor, does this mean humans are stronger than us? Daniel chuckled softly at that, shaking his head. Not stronger. Just different. We bleed, we break, we die like anyone else. But we don't let fear run the show. That's all. Professor Ktharn's eyes narrowed, not in disapproval but in contemplation. Then he lifted his chin, his words resonant, final. Then let it be remembered. From this day forward, humanity will not be known merely as another new species in our academies. They will be known as the Firewalkers, the Death Tamers, those who laugh where others despair. This will reshape how the galaxy sees your kind. A ripple of awe swept through the hall. Some students bowed their heads in acknowledgement, others exchanged glances heavy with unease, but none could deny the weight of the proclamation. Daniel exhaled slowly, the corners of his mouth lifting. He hadn't set out to redefine humanity's image, but perhaps that was inevitable. Humans had always been underestimated, until the moment they weren't. As the session ended, the hall erupted into voices again, not whispers this time but vigorous debate. Some students argued furiously, others spoke with excitement, but all of them circled back to the same word, human. Rathak scuttled to Daniel's side, mandibles clicking with urgency. Tell me, are there other dangers your world embraces? Storms? Quakes? Tides that devour? Daniel clapped a hand lightly against the insectoid's shoulder. Plenty. But that's another story. Behind them, Jorvak lingered at the exit, his gaze still sharp but his posture less rigid. For a moment, his golden eyes met Daniel's, and though no words passed between them, the silence spoke. Acknowledgement, reluctant respect, and the beginning of something not yet defined. Professor Ktharn remained at the dais, watching the human leave, his thoughts deep. He had taught for decades, seen countless species pass through his halls, but never had one unsettled his understanding so profoundly. The phrase lingered in his mind like an ember that refused to die, mountains that bleed fire, and the human who laughed, Outside, Daniel walked into the cool air of the academy courtyard. The sky above shimmered with the faint glow of distant stars, and he found himself grinning. He had faced down a hall of skeptics, stood against their disbelief, and left them questioning their own fears. That was enough. He muttered under his breath, a private joke meant for no one but himself. Guess the universe has a lot more fire left to see. And with that, he laughed again, quiet, defiant, unafraid, the sound rolling out into the night, carrying farther than he could have known.